All right. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Hi. No. What? No. No. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I'm not ready for this. I didn't have any time. I didn't get anything accomplished. I didn't have literally. I went to bed a little bit late last night, and I didn't have enough time to pull things together. So I'm sorry, but I'm just not doing. I'm not prepared. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. All right, I'm sure I probably had you going there. Hi, this is Jonathan. I'm here. It's Nycos Friends Day, and I am absolutely prepared for this episode. This is called the preparation episode. If you are a game master and you have ever had that happen to you where you simply weren't getting your game together, I'm sure the question is, what do you do when you're not prepared? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So, thank you for joining us here on NycosRPG. I'm Jonathan Alvin, the Game Master, and I am very happy to have you with us today because this is going to be kind of a special episode. I didn't really put together all of the notes that I should have perhaps because a episode like this generally needs some detail. So let's get at it, all right? Shall we? Nycos RPG, as you may know, is a games mechanism I created, and when I started doing game mastering about 5 decades ago, I thought it was important to have everything together. I developed the concept of the entire world of Nikos. It took me 5, 6 years to even realize that the story had a plot and a course. The first iteration wasn't because the first iteration was the first time doing things. And I started in 74 at the age of 11, and I didn't have any clue about Longtail's story. I didn't have any real idea of how things were going to happen. And I certainly didn't have anywhere near the preparation that one might need to embark on a multi year games event. But I had a determination to provide my players with a story, and I endeavored to convey as much of what I had in my head to my players as possible. I had the advantage at that early age of having been a prolific reader, so I had a rather for 11 year old, I had a very extensive and somewhat precocious vocabulary, and I also had a penchant, if the French, a penchant for the theatric, and so the stories that I told were entertaining, were enjoyable. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had people playing. But my groups were traditional size. It was two to six players most game sessions, and the panoply of races and classes and advancement direction. The players were fundamentally playing their characters the best they knew how in reference to whatever they had in their head in terms of what their character looked like and such. And while I can, visualize that some of those very first level groups that I played with, there was no coherency, there was no concept of the injunction, none of that. And being prepared for a game doesn't mean that you've got every base covered. It doesn't mean that you have all of the resources gathered together. What it does mean is that you are able to run the game or run a game to entertain your players without having to have all of your T's crossed and I dotted. that you might want. And truly, if you had to wait until you were absolutely prepared on any game session, you might delay a dozen times before you actually held your first event, and doubtful that you might be able to even draw people that many times or for that length of time before they actually quit on you. So the thing about running a game, if it comes down to really three things. Number one, you have to be physically prepared. Now, in the case of dungeon mastery, if you have any group with that has dice, generally you don't have to worry about being prepared, because you can sit here with nothing. I could run a story right this moment, starting right this second, and go, whether it be to pick up a medieval setting or a fantasy setting or a modern story theme. You could start without any of that preparation. You literally just have to have things you physically need. So if you've got a games group, whoever's sitting down at the table, there's going to be somebody with dice, so you're covered. You've got your dice. Do you need to have a notebook with any notes taken down? Most people would like that, and even I don't need one. But then again, I have 50 years. I've built stories out of nothing, and so here's the trick on being prepared. If you are physically there and you're physically feeling well enough to sit in a chair, you are prepared. Ooh, that rhymed. I don't know if I could probably say that again. If you, the reality is that a story is words linked together to make a sentence and to make sense, and that's it. As long as it makes some modicum of sense. Of course, I say that, and immediately I think of games like Paranoia or My Division 7. The game that I just ran this last weekend was absolutely insane. And I couldn't have been prepared for what was laying in store for that game session, because the players, first-rate improvisationists. I swear, they claim to have never had any training, but the kid was a natural. He was a 20-something individual, sharp as a tack, and just was able to bring to reality the persona he was playing in such a rich way that you couldn't have been prepared to deal with that person on a month of Sundays. The preparation really is just showing up. I know it sounds glib, but the three things that you have to have, as I said before, is you have to have a semblance of a story, the dice to roll, and the will to be there, and that's it. I'm sorry, there is no secret to preparation. What is important is that preparation means mentally being prepared. It doesn't mean physically having all the attributes, all the skills. You don't have to have a map. You don't have to have even an outline. If you do three things that you have to do, then preparation doesn't matter. You have to be able to string sentences together, one to the next, and have that make sense. And if I have lost you already in this, then maybe my argument about preparation goes out the window. But the reality is that you can build a story out of anything. And in this case, we're building it out of my lack of preparation this morning. So the biggest challenge in the game is the second thing you have to have that absolutely has to be there is it has to have the opportunity. If my players don't show up to a game session, there's no game. I don't care how prepared you are. I don't care how much you've drawn out, detailed, scaled, practiced. Without players at the table, there is no games group. So preparation really means invitation. You've got to have invited people to the game session. And that invitation can be as simple as, hey, we're playing on Tuesday, can you make it? But it can be quite a lot more detailed, especially if you are launching a campaign of more than a couple of sessions. You may want to have the session 0. I've talked about it a few times. I've done an episode or two about it. I'm going to go back and revitalize that old episode. And if I have to re-record it, I will. But the preparation means invitation. You got to have people at the table. If the table is empty, there is no game. The second thing you have to have in terms of preparation is intent. And this one may be the only thing that I can think of that would deprive your players of a game session if you came to the table and weren't up to it. And you can deliver a lackluster performance. You could almost phone in a game session. It won't be as enjoyable. Your players will find a way to have fun as much as they can, even at your expense, if you aren't prepared or not intending to run a game. But it is the second thing that you absolutely have to have. Even if you have no preparation, at least you have to have the will and the intent to run the game, because without a force behind it, the story will fall flat. I've talked on several occasions about the idea of there being a sandbox. The idea that you can play a game totally devoid of games mastery. And I just recently had a contact with one of my viewers about Fiasco or other GM-less games. And while it is true that those do exist and they are in their own right an enjoyable experience, a Fiasco game by its own definition has a prep time, has a setup, has a series of decisions that have to be made in advance of play, whether it's just draw the card and go with what it says. There is still some setup. And while you don't need a director to play, and you can roll a random dice to see who goes first, and all of the things that make a game can happen without a storyteller being prepared, without a storyteller at all. The difference is that is not an intentional role-playing game. And I'm probably going to get roasted for that, but I do still believe that if you're talking about a role play game, by definition, you need to have a storyteller, because otherwise it is a directionless series of vignettes that really don't have to be the same characters. Literally, you could be running your role play group like an improvisational set, and every scene could be played out like a Fiasco scene without a storyteller, but it would be disjoint, disconnected, and by swapping out the characters all the time, it would feel more like a variety show, like Carol Burnett or something like that, because the pieces would only be threaded together by the players being there. And when I speak of role-playing, I do reply, I am referring to a directed play series of events where a game master puts a spirit or a through line session to session, and therefore builds the concept of the campaign. Even if it's even if it's not a railroaded campaign, nonetheless, the story director does act as the backbone to the elements. So the third thing, besides can't remember the other two. No. Sorry. The third thing you have to have beyond intent and the materials, the physical materials, really is a desire. And I separate intent from desire, because you can intend to do something and not necessarily want to see it through, whereas in the case of desire, you are looking at the whole of the story from first episode to the end of the story, all linked together. And if you don't have a dedication to that purpose, if you are not putting the story in front of all of the rest of it, then you don't have a game session. So you have to have preparation is you have to be prepared to carry forward that particular through line. Does it mean you have to know all the details? No. As a matter of fact, my groups will tell you that in some sessions it feels more like a romp, because we are just running seemingly listlessly in a vignette, a mini story within the larger campaign, and therefore it doesn't have the intensity that it would have in a normal sense. But you're still dedicated to the advancement of the persona that are in that session. You're thinking about where the story is going to go, and so you're considering the continuity. So if you are ill prepared, the possibility is that the story will not follow the methodology of your prior events, may not feel the coherency of prior events, and if you're phoning it in, so to speak, as I said before, it won't feel even like it's part of the series. But here's the real secret. Players come to a campaign with the idea of completing the story, and if they themselves are ill prepared, they still show up, they still figure out how to work their way through the game and such. And the individual character, and from the standpoint of a player now being ill prepared, a character won't feel the same sometimes, because that person is literally, as I said, phoning it in and making the emotions and the decisions that a persona might, but they're not perhaps remembering what their purpose in the story is. They may not remember why they're accomplishing what they're accomplishing. They might be disconnected in terms of other things that are on their minds. And it affects the game, but it doesn't affect the game nearly as much as a storyteller. So of those three, I believe that the dedication to the story is the most required preparation that has to be done, and that's literally a frame of mind. It's how you come at the session. And yes, you can even be ill prepared in that way, and the game session will go off. The players will get to roll some dice and make some decisions and progress in whatever fashion that they can in your intellectual absence. But this lack of preparation doesn't mean you're not prepared to run a game. So when I say that I have been GMing for 50 years, does that absolutely mean that in every session I was the most optimal game master I could be? Of course not. We all have our ups and downs. Does it mean that I never called off a game? No, I've done that as well. There are times where just literally something has come up that makes it impossible for the event to be held in that position. But that could even be if you are prepared. You know, the universe is a capricious place, and we don't always know what our options are going to be from moment to moment. So sometimes even the best prepared game masters find that they can't engage in a game session for whatever reason. So when I'm speaking of the question of what do you do when you're unprepared, the reality is that I am never unprepared. I might be unfocused. I might be in a flux and not able to grow the story. I might be lost and not certain where we as a group are going. I've done that enough times to choke a horse. But all of these only refer to the outcome. And I think the real key when it comes down to whether you're prepared or not is you are playing a game, for crying out loud. We can have the most vaunted plot line in the world. We might have all of the intention that the game is going to go the right direction. We might be dedicated to the completion of that event, and it still can be a inadequate game session because it's people that are involved. And just to realize, if you are running a long-term campaign, week over week, season after season, episode after episode, there are going to be good episodes and there are going to be bad episodes, but they are still episodes. And so bringing with you the dedication to a story, the intention to have a good time and relate to the players, and you have a set of dice, you can have a game session. So the real secret to being prepared is the will. Do you want to be a game master? I know that I did. From the get-go, I wanted to be the big cheese. I wanted to be the one driving the story. I wanted to play all the bad guys and all the good guys and all the side individuals and all of the silly people you run into in life. I wanted to be all of those things. And a game master generally is the showman amongst the group. So if you're ready for that, if you are a storyteller and game master, why don't you consider joining the Games Mastery Academy? It's one of my channels. And if you go to Games Mastery Academy, there are lessons that go back decades, literally. Some of the episodes were filmed in the 2010s and before. So we are talking about over a decade ago. So go back and check those out and watch some of those videos. Now, I will be revamping any of them. So if you see something in one of those earlier episodes that you'd like to have carried forward in the modern era, if the dated episode you come across needs to be updated, why not leave me a comment so that I will know to fix that. You can link here. I also will put a post out in the next week or so on NycosRPG. There will be an ongoing post for response about new episodes. And that Games Masters Academy is really a major focus. Now, the reality is that I am building towards having for you a resource that will be prime number one detailed information you need to have to be the greatest game master in the world. And watch for those episodes coming up. You'll be able to tell the difference because unlike this episode, I'll be prepared. All right, it's been nice talking to you. I'm Jonathan Alvin. This is NycosRPG, and although we didn't quite make it to a half an hour, we're pretty close, and I will see you in the next episode. Do remember we are on Mondays through Fridays, 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. every day, providing some content for you, and I hope to have you join us in our Patreon program so that you can actually play at our games on the weekends. More on that next time. I'll talk to you later. Bye.